The sword and the knot. Medicine is learning to stop untangling and start cutting. Obesity is just the loudest example. In 333 BC, Alexander the Great marched into Gordium and found a wagon lashed to a post by a knot so tangled that no one had ever loosened it. An oracle had promised the rule of Asia to whoever could. Alexander studied it for a moment, drew his sword, and cut it through at a single stroke. I've been thinking about that knot for most of my career because it is the truest metaphor I know for the way medicine has approached chronic disease and for that way that approach is now, finally, changing. One disease, wearing many masks. 7 years ago, my co-authors and I opened an article in the Bulletin of the American College of Surgeons with this story. We were writing about the metabolic syndrome, obesity, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, abnormal cholesterol, fatty liver disease, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and several cancers. For a century, medicine treated each of these as its own problem, with its own specialist, its own drugs, its own clinics, picking at one strand of the knot at a time, indefinitely. Our argument was hearsay at the time, and is becoming common sense now. These are not separate diseases. They are the downstream expressions of one disease, wound around a single control point in the brain and gut that defends body weight the way a thermostat defends temperature. And if that is true, then the whole knot can be cut with one decisive stroke rather than untied strand by strand. We had proof. Metabolic and bariatric surgery does exactly that. It resets the body's defended set point and sends type 2 diabetes into durable remission in about half of patients, even 12 years later. It was and remains one of the most effective, durable therapies of all medicine. The country did not want to hear it. Surgery was drastic. It was what you did when you had failed to control yourself. The stigma that coats obesity, the lie that it is a matter of willpower, coated the treatment too. So the most effective, durable therapy, we had reached roughly 1 in 100 of the people who qualified, and we told ourselves that was simply how things were. Then the drugs arrived, and everything changed, though not in the way the headlines say. The number that had never moved. In 2026, for the first time in the modern era, the American adult obesity rate went down. Gallup measured it as 36.4%, off from a record of 39.9% in 2022, as the share of adults taking a GLP-1 medication of weight loss rose from 3% to 11% in 2 years. Sit with that for a second. Every anti-obesity effort of the past 40 years, the food pyramids, the gym memberships, the willpower sermons, failed to bend the national curve even slightly. The class of molecules did it in a few years. The individual results are staggering by the standards of everything that came before. Semaglutide takes off around 15% of body weight, and in a landmark trial cut heart attacks and strokes by a fifth in people with obesity and heart disease. Tirzepatide does better, about 20%. And in the first head-to-head trial, it beat semaglutide cleanly. There is now a pill, or forglipron, that reaches roughly 12% with no needle at all. And a triple hormone agent, retretitide, is posting numbers in trials that approach what surgery achieves. Here is the part almost everyone gets wrong. The drugs did not solve the biology. Surgery had already proven the biology years earlier. What the drug solved was the politics. A weekly injection did what 50 years of surgical outcomes could not. It made it sayable in the exam room, the boardroom, the policy hearing, that obesity is a chronic biological disease and not a character flaw. That it is the real revolution. GLP-1s moved the Overton window, the invisible boundary of what a society is willing to say out loud. The moment it moved, everything my colleagues and I had argued in 2019 stopped sounding radical and started sounding obvious. We'll take the win. But I'm not celebrating it the way you might expect. Because the most important part of the story is not about obesity at all. The pattern is bigger than obesity. A few weeks ago, a patient had a liver tumor destroyed while lying still on a table. No incision, no needle, no radiation. A focused beam of sound liquefied the tumor from the outside, a technology called histotripsy. She went home the same day. Since the FDA cleared it in 2023, more than 1,000 people have had liver tumors treated this way. And this spring, the same system was submitted for kidney tumors. That is not an isolated marvel. It is the same move in a different organ. And in Figure 6, you see a list of the things in which this pattern that is bigger than obesity is demonstrated. Liver and kidney tumors, severe aortic stenosis, advanced metastatic cancers, and hepatitis C. Look at the shape of what is happening across medicine right now. In severe aortic stenosis, TAVR, TAVR, a replacement valve delivered through a catheter in the leg, now matches open heart surgery at 5 and 7 years without ever cracking the chest. It has quietly become the default for a huge share of patients. In advanced cancer, immunotherapy is turning what used to be a death sentence within months into chronic survivable disease for many. In hepatitis C, a pill cures more than 95% of patients in 8 to 12 weeks, where we once waited helplessly for cirrhosis and a transplant. Different organs, different specialties, different technologies, but the same underlying move every single time. Stop managing the consequences of a disease for a lifetime and make one precise, less invasive, decisive stroke at its mechanism. Stop untangling the knot. Cut it. Obesity is simply the loudest, most public instance, the one that puts the whole shift on a magazine cover. But it is the one of a general transformation, and that is why it matters far beyond the people who take these drugs or have these operations. We are watching medicine change its fundamental posture towards chronic disease, from lifeline management to decisive cure. And let us not forget that currently in the United States, we spend 94% of our costs on chronic disease. Moving upstream is the only logical answer. The honest ledger. None of this is free, and I refuse to pretend otherwise because dishonesty is exactly how you squander the trust these tools will require. My own field has a reflex. Wave the drugs away with stop taking it, and the weight comes back. It is true. About 2/3 of the lost weight returns within a year of stopping. But said by itself, that's a double standard, and it is beneath us. Surgery is something a patient lives with for the rest of their life also. The difference is the direction of the door. Stopping a drug is a decision you can revisit next month, when your circumstances or the science change. A surgical complication does not offer that. A stricture, a bleeding ulcer at the surgical connection, chronic malabsorption, the reactive hypoglycemia that can follow a bypass, the new alcohol use disorder that a reshaped gut can unmask, those do not reverse when you change your mind. Figure 3 gives you cutting the knot, mean weight loss by intervention. And it shows lifestyle modification, 5 to 10%. Metabolic and bariatric surgery, Roux-en-Y or sleeve, 25 to 30%. But in between, an increasingly lengthening number for medications. We tell patients a drug is a life sentence because you have to keep taking it. We almost never tell them that a complication from bariatric surgery is a life sentence because you can never stop having it. I say this as a bariatric surgeon who believes deeply in the operation, as one who has personally operated on thousands of people. Saying both halves of the truth does not weaken the case for surgery. It is the only thing that makes the comparison honest. There is one knot and one decisive stroke that cuts it, and that stroke now comes in more than one form. The operation and the molecule are not rivals fighting over patients. They are two blades of the same sword, and the honest clinician reaches for whichever one a particular human being can actually live with. Often it is both. The same honesty applies to every item in that table: histotripsy, TAVR, immunotherapy, direct-acting antivirals. Each carries its own ledger of risk, cost, and durability. The point is not that the new stroke is always better. The point is that a decisive, less invasive option now exists where it did not before, and patients deserve to weigh it with both columns visible. The barrier was never the biology. If disease after disease now has a decisive answer, then the real scandal is no longer scientific, it is architectural. We built a health system that pays in perpetuity for the consequences of disease. The insulin, the dialysis, the stents, the repeat admissions, the long downstream bill of conditions we let advance. What it resists paying for is the treatment that prevents all of it. GLP-1 coverage is a patchwork of cliffs and prior authorization mazes. Surgery sits behind network exclusions and long stretches of the country with no program at all. The newest PRESIS therapies are approved faster than they are covered. That architecture made a grim kind of sense when the decisive options didn't exist, but they exist now. Keeping the old payment structure in place is a choice. And as the obesity data are beginning to show at population scale, an expensive one. This is the core of what I mean by Health 4.0, a system organized around durable, mechanism-level treatment, delivered by whichever precise stroke fits the patient, and paid for as the chronic disease care it actually is, continuously, equitably, and without forcing patients to prove their worthiness at every renewal. The series ahead. This essay is the opening argument. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to take the knot apart strand by strand. Each piece will pair the surgical evidence with the new pharmacologic and technological evidence, honestly, complications and all. Diabetes, the disease that first proved an operation could outperform a lifetime of pills or injections. Hypertension and dyslipidemia, the quiet comorbidities that resolve when you cut the knot. Fatty liver disease, NASH, where drugs, surgery, and even focused energy tools are converging. PCOS, metabolic disease wearing a reproductive mask. Obesity-associated cancer, the strand we least like to talk about. Same cadence, same discipline, the data, the mechanism, the honest ledger, and the policy fix. Alexander understood something the field forgot 100 years ago. Some knots are not meant to be untied. They're meant to be cut. Across medicine, we have finally built the swords. The only question left is whether we will build a system with the nerve to use them. Subscribe to follow the series. Another version is on LinkedIn newsletter. Original article is available at my website, robinblackstone.com. If you're seeing this shift in your own corner of medicine, tell me the example I'm missing. I'm collecting them. Thank you.